To introduce myself, I'm Sheridan Duke and I work for the City of Bunbury, and I've also been seconded into the Economic Relief team, which sits within our Economic Development team here at the City. So part of what we've been doing once COVID has hit is basically assisting our businesses. And one way that we've done that, I don't know if any of you guys in the room did receive a survey from somebody at the City, but we took that information from a survey as to what our Bunbury businesses would like, and we've turned this into a series of workshops on particular topics. So one of those is grants, as there are a lot out there at the moment. So throughout this presentation, there will be a couple of polls. We've got 7 in total throughout the hour, and they're just quick multiple choice questions. And so we'd really love your feedback if you can provide it. And then at the end, there's just a quick survey. Like I said before, if you want to jump in and ask a question, Dominique's more than happy to ask as we go. Otherwise, at the very end, what we'll do is open up the mics and we can have a bit of a off-the-record chat, but still being recorded. This whole presentation, we will send out a whole heap of cheat sheets and also the presentation in full, which will also be a recording, so you can hear any conversations that happen as we go. And lastly, obviously, there's the chat forum. So if you just want to pop a question in there, I'm here moderating them. So at any time that we get some questions, I can jump in and ask Dominique to answer them. I will introduce Dominique, and she's from Wicked Strategies, and she's going to introduce herself. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sheridan. That was brilliant. You said absolutely everything that everyone needs to know. So thanks for that. That was really fantastic. Look, it's really great to be here, and I'm actually loving that we've got a small group because it is more intimate. It does allow you to jump in and ask questions, and believe it or not, that makes it a lot more fun for everybody. So please feel free to do that. Don't be shy. So look, a quick bit about why I'm here, who I am and why I'm here. I was formerly the Director of Sponsorship with Healthway, and I oversaw $11 million in funding each year. So I was really lucky, very, very lucky. I was able to give away $11 million, a lot of money, and I read a lot of applications. And one of the things I specialise in now is that I review grant programs, and I still also write grant applications for businesses. So I sit on both sides of the fence. Okay, tonight's session is directed at business recovery and repair. So it is all about how to navigate COVID-19 and apply for those government grants. There's no doubt that the last few months have been really challenging, and the future's so different to what you thought it would be. And in fact, with so much change, doing things the same way you used to is just no longer an option. But the silver lining is finding opportunities to help you recover and maybe even prosper. And so it's really fantastic that the City of Bunbury is having this conversation with you about business recovery, very much taking a leadership role in local government. And it's really wonderful that they're presenting this webinar to help you with government grants. So thanks to Sheridan and Co. We have 5 topics to run through tonight. I'm going to give you an overview of what's happening in regional WA in terms of business and COVID-19 support. Then we're going to move into what funders are really looking for, how to address the application form, how to make sure that you complete it correctly. Application do's and don'ts includes my 10 most common mistakes. So you really want to hang around for that. Key definitions is a really great slide on outcomes and outputs and the differences there. And I also go through a little bit of jargon. Jargon is one of those things that you'll hear a lot in grants. We do use a particular kind of language. So navigating the jargon is really going to be helpful. And lastly, I'm going to talk about how to do an acquittal and what an evaluation is. But without further ado, before we start, we have an acknowledgement of country. Oh, thank you, Sheridan. She's just prompted me to say, without further ado, we actually have a poll. we would love to know what industry you're from. So if you could please complete this, it's anonymous. So the good thing is you won't have any concerns that we know who you are. And it'll be great to see just the industries as we go through this. So I'll wait for you to fill out those results, and then we can all see who's who in the zoo.
Sorry, Dominique, I got a little bit keen.
No, you prompted me, which is perfect because I wasn't reading my notes. I was too busy.
5 from 5, and here we go. Share results.
Right. Okay, can everybody see that on the screen? Just curious, the one who is an other, what's your line of business?
Dominique, it's Ros here from AutoSmart. We are chemical wholesalers, so we sell everything from cleaning products to car washing, degreasers.
Yeah.
So for us, COVID has actually gone a little bit in the opposite direction because we supply some of the products that people have needed.
Yeah, oh look, I'm really glad to hear that there's businesses that are doing well. And thanks for joining us, Ros.
No worries, thank you.
So we have acknowledgement to country. We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Western Australia and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. For those in Bunbury, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri Noongar people and their importance to Bunbury's heritage and identity. We pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and their cultures, and to elders past and present and emerging. So hopefully everybody got to see that, and I'll just pop Sheridan back on the screen. Brilliant. Fantastic. There's quite a few areas of support that you're able to get from state and federal government, as you can see by this list. And as I said before, I just have some stats that I want to share with you. These are from the Regional Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And there is a new survey that'll be out next week. The results, I should say, will be out next week. But in the meantime, up until now, 80% of businesses had losses in May and 38% were significantly hit. 50% had to stand down staff, and most of these have been casual jobs. 35% stopped operating temporarily, so closed their doors. And 2/3 changed the way they work, including working from home or how their goods and services are delivered. So we know already that we've had a florist that really excelled in online deliveries, so well done. And this webinar is also an example, because normally this would be a workshop delivered face-to-face, held in person, but the city's changed the way they've delivered it and it's now a webinar. So there's lots of examples of trying to think of new ways to conduct your business. I'm hopeful because it's end of financial year, start of the new financial year. You've all had these discussions by now with your accountant, and anything that you would have been eligible for, you would have already taken advantage of. This link at the bottom here, Small Business WA website, the Development Commission, that really is the best place to go to find out all the business information that you need for COVID. So once you get this presentation from Sheridan, probably tomorrow, make sure you do get a chance to familiarise yourself with these links, because it's an invaluable resource, most definitely. So we're going to jump straight into our poll number 2 before I move on. And that is, it would really be good to know if you've been able to take advantage of any of these subsidies. It would help us understand a bit more about what's happening with the Bunbury and South West uptake. So please let us know. Again, we already know that one of our lovely florist Ainsley hasn't been able to take advantage of JobKeeper, but it would be really good to know what people have been able to benefit from. Just going to maximise that just so that everybody can see that. once Sheridan's got the results, she'll pop them through. Only one of you, JobKeeper. Okay. Congratulations to the person that jumped in to the City of Bunbury Small Business Grant. Well done. That's really great, really great. And a couple of you with the electricity credit, that $2,500 would have been a big help. And unfortunately, 2 of you haven't been able to. There's probably some reasons, some being that if you're a new business, unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible for some of those. So can we just hear from the second person that wasn't able to benefit? What was behind that? Are you a new business? Or, oh, I think I know. I think it's Roz. Is it because you were doing so well that you wouldn't have been eligible?
No. We were eligible for the electricity credit, but yes, we didn't get a great deal of relief for anything else, but we were able to get the electricity credit.
I'm glad that there's something in there that could help.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, that was us that couldn't get the electricity credit.
I beg your pardon?
Ainsley?
That was us, yeah. We use way too much power.
All right. Well, we are going to head straight into our third poll today, which is about grants. So what we'd love to know is if any of you have ever applied for a government grant. You'll see these ones on your screen. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with them, but don't worry if you're not, because we're going to talk about them a lot more tonight.
I should have actually selected 2 of those, but only selected 1.
Which were the 2? Which was the one you didn't select?
So I know about the City of Bunbury ones,
Yeah.
but I didn't make it. I didn't get mine in time. So
Yes, that was, you really needed to get in quick because
yeah,
test and yeah, it was great that they could help so many people.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, 2 of you are not aware. Okay, well that's good. Thank you everybody for answering those polls so far. So as I said, we're going to jump right into grants, and starting of course with what is a grant. Well, it's a financial award. It's a process, so you do a grant, sign a contract to do what you said you were going to do in your application, and the best bit is that you don't have to pay the money back. So grants provide some incredible benefits in that respect, that it allows you to complete the project or develop your business without actually having to put all the money in yourself. So why would government provide money for people to do that? Well, even during COVID-19, the government grants follow the same 3 things. Number 1 is to identify an opportunity or solve a problem. An opportunity could be a gap in the market. It could be a gap in your market, meaning that it's relevant to you and your business, or you have a bigger idea for the industry. Whereas COVID grants are most definitely solving a problem, that's an economic problem. They're helping businesses with their economic recovery. Number 2 is to meet funders' objectives. For example, Tourism WA's business survival objectives are about ensuring a viable tourism industry, which is enabling businesses to thrive and survive. So the ones that attract visitors to the state and offer amazing experiences, they're really helping those businesses to survive. Number 3, the objectives need to link to benefits and outcomes, because funders want to build a better community or a better industry. They look for things like how many jobs have been created, or they want you to be able to offer increased skills and professional development, or it could be enhancing the reputation of the Southwest among visitors. So those 3 examples, the first one is economic impact, about trying to generate more jobs. The second one is capacity building, to try to provide people the opportunity to gain further skills. And the last one is tourism impact. So this is where you're going to start to hear some of the jargon coming in. This is very general grant jargon. And as I said, I've got a cheat sheet for you. Millions of dollars is available for regional West Aussies. It absolutely is a case of if you don't apply, you don't get it. Hopefully that's going to encourage you all to apply. Generally speaking, there's 4 types of funding categories, and you're most likely to fit into 1 or 2 of them. But I'm going to, again, jump in straight away and say that the word project, you're going to hear me use that a lot, and the word project is used across all of the funding categories. So even a development grant is a project, an event is a project, developing a business plan is a project, so is building a logistics warehouse, or building a website, or holding a business conference. They're all termed projects. So even though projects is a category of funding, you're going to hear project used all the way through your applications, through the guidelines, and here tonight. I should also mention that operational funding is really rare because it covers wages and salaries. Most grants won't include operational costs, but the recent Lottery West COVID grants did, and sport and art also have operational costs. That's very common amongst those industries and a bit more common amongst others, but broadly, operational funding is rare. So there's a long list of things that aren't eligible, and generally speaking, the first to apply in about 90% of grants. Number 1, not all costs can be funded. And that's purely because governments don't want you to put all your eggs in one basket. They want you to be able to identify that, oh, sorry, I've skipped. Not all costs can be funded is just simply because of their outcomes and their criteria, their objectives. So really read those guidelines to make sure that you're understanding what is eligible. Number 2, you really need to contribute to the cost, and that's, as I said, they don't want you, they are worried about putting all the eggs in one basket. So they really want to make sure that you're able to contribute to that, that there's a little bit of sustainability behind the project. And sometimes they also ask you to have funds from other partners, other grants, other sponsors or collaborators, and that's called leveraged funds. So you'll see that on your cheat sheet when we talk about jargon. Leveraged funds comes up a lot in some government grants. Number 3, no retrospective costs. This trips people up quite a lot. The reality is, even though you're planning your project, you can't actually start spending the money until your funding is approved. So if you're wanting to build a website with a shopping cart, that's going to deliver twice as many flowers and bouquets and beautiful arrangements as you had previously. Fantastic, go ahead and plan it, submit your grant application, but you can't sign the contract with your website developer or go forward or pay anybody, because that's considered retrospective. So just bear that in mind. And lastly, of course, don't add GST in your budget. All your budgets are exclusive of GST because that's added on top. So if you're applying for a $10,000 grant, you'll be awarded $10,000 plus GST. So that budget really needs to be excluding GST. It's really easy for you to keep in the loop about what's happening with grants and with business in general by signing up for e-news. And it's free, so don't be shy. The city's e-news is a great resource for you, and you'll find out lots of information. They've got some news coming up in the near future about a program that they're aligning with called Grant Guru. And so they will definitely be able to give you some advice on what grants are open. So sign up for e-news. If you have an industry body, please go ahead and really get to know people in your industry. Maybe think about joining the Chamber of Commerce if the costs aren't too high for you. Look at the Small Business Development Commission because that's free, and the Southwest Development Commission website and e-news, they have things about what's happening in the Southwest. So definitely really encourage you. I really encourage you to do that. What have I got here? How to apply for a grant. I'm going to jump straight in here and give you my 5 steps on how to apply for a grant. Firstly, you have to review everything. The website, the guidelines, the FAQs, read the application form, get to know what all the requirements are because it's not always immediately clear straight away. Definitely copy the questions into Word and work on it from Word. It's much easier and it'll save you from losing any data in the application form. And trust me when I say it happens to everybody. So make that process really simple for yourself and copy the questions in Word. Number 2, contact the funder. While you're reviewing all of the requirements, you'll have questions. So make sure that you're making that first introduction to the funder. Have a chat about your project. Definitely confirm that you're eligible. Ask questions, find out the pitfalls, the must-dos and must-don'ts, and ask if you can send them a draft of feedback. Most of them will let you do that, but if you don't ask, they may not. Number 4 is gathering evidence. Now, this is another word that you hear a lot, and it refers to the quotes, the approvals, the plans, or other documents that you might need. So get these ready, particularly the quotes. You might need a business case, or you might need a customer survey. All of those help to show why your project is important and how it will make a difference. You also generally need letters of support. So ask your industry groups or the city even. If you've got great relationships with the city, please, or try to establish those relationships with the city. And there may be other collaborators that you have or partners that you have, not necessarily people that you that provide other funds, but people that you work with. Make sure you get letters of support because that's really going to show up as a weakness if you don't. The evidence part of the grant is really critical, and if you don't do this, you are very, very unlikely to be successful in your application. Last but not least, allow yourself enough time and then double it. And I'm really serious about this because you can't underestimate the amount of time it takes to fill out a grant application because there are so many other things attached to it, and evidence is one of those things. So once you've gotten through everything, let someone else read it to see if it's clear. And of course, if the funder gives you feedback, you'll need time to make any changes. So can't stress that enough. And also my tip here is to make the budget a high priority because this is one of the areas that might need a little bit more time than you realise. Now, I think we have another poll. Fantastic. Great. So you can see down the bottom, there's current grant opportunities. We'd really like to know if you're aware of these grants that are currently open. Have you previously applied for any government grants, including the ones that are open? If you haven't, and for some of you that aren't aware of the government grants that we've had so far, please bear in mind that new grants are being, when we're being made aware of new grants all the time. 5 of you have not previously applied. Okay, well look, I'm really hopeful that this session is going to give you lots of tips, and by the end of it, you'll feel a lot more confident about applying for grants. Particularly when we look at what funders are looking for in an application. So when I'm assessing applications, I do a couple of things. I know already that there's a checklist of things that they need to provide me, and you'll see that list, you'll see these dot points These are all things that I'm looking for when I'm assessing an application. And at the same time, when I'm writing an application on behalf of a client, I'm making sure that I'm answering all of these things. And then I cross-reference it with who, why, what, when, and how. So that's what we'll go through. We'll go through those 5 points there. But before we get on to who, you'll see again, very, very important that you have a prior conversation with the funding body, because they want to support you. They have good advice. They want to understand your project and establish that relationship. They're there to help. So if you don't contact them, as I said, you really do reduce your chance of success. So starting with who? Who is your organisation? What's its history? Who's on the project team? Who are the consultants or contractors? Are there any partners or collaborators? Who is the audience? Who are you targeting and who will benefit? So it could be the industry or it could be a certain demographic. Your customers, you might have a very specific customer demographic. And then why? Why is your project important? Is it an opportunity or is it a problem? What difference will it make? Why will it help your business? Why does the community or industry need it? And this is where I really encourage you to look very closely at the benefits and the outcomes, those objectives, and make sure that they really align with what the funder is wanting to achieve. Why and what are probably the 2 most important questions that you need to be able to answer. So what is your project? What will you do with the money? What approvals do you have? What approvals do you need? If you haven't got those approvals yet, you really do need to get started. What support do you have? What evidence do you have of that? So again, you might need some surveys. You might need a community engagement report, depending on the size of your organisation and the size of the actual grant. What are your budget costs? What quotes do you have? Because you can't guess the price, and this is why the budget is so important. What's your supporting argument for why should you be funded? And then when is it all happening? What's the time frame? What are the milestones with those major actions or tasks that you need to achieve along the way, the dates that you need to achieve them? Make sure you're ready with no unexplained time gaps, because remember, you can't be funded for things that start before the funding is approved. That's that retrospective costs that we mentioned really early on. So make sure you understand the timing. And lastly, how will you complete the project? How will you measure your success? Do you need to show how you're going to mitigate any risks? And if so, you need a risk matrix. If you're using contractors, explain how you'll choose the contractor or your tender process. Show that you're able and capable through good project management, because funders want to know that your project is well planned. So you do need to plan first and then apply. You can't do it the other way around. But let me just backtrack and talk through the budget, because I think that's a really important element to talk about in this whole process. The budget needs to include itemised costs and details with real prices. You can't just include a line item about the budget. You really do need to explain exactly what it is that you're asking for in this fund. So take that extra bit of time with the budget, so you'll see that it really requires real costings and we've got another poll. Just before we start on what makes a winning application, we'd love to know if you've had any success in applying for government grants. Hopefully you have. Hopefully you're going to soon. Fantastic. We've had 1 government grant winner. Well done. Congratulations. We'll make more government grant winners out of you by the end of the night. Well, for those of you that you've done all this work on the application, but how do you know if you even stand a chance? So my tip here is to go back to basics, review what you've written, and double check that you've addressed the criteria, that you've provided the right info in the right question, because sometimes the questions are really similar. So make sure you've got the right answers in the right question. Think of each question like an elevator pitch. You have to get to the point really quickly and answer succinctly. You can't warble on. Word limits will stop this, but if there's no word limit, check that you're only stating the most relevant facts. And relevant and important aren't the same thing, because all the facts might be important, but they may not be relevant to that question. So just try to rein that in and really have a bit of a bird's eye approach to what you're writing in your application. My little smiley face here is to remind me how funny this one is, because it happens all the time. Don't even think of saying that it's amazing or the best unless you can back it up with a nice shiny trophy that says that. Yes, you should highlight your attributes, but you have to be objective. So you would be surprised how many people say it's such a wonderful project. Well, I'm glad it's a wonderful project, but you really need to explain why it's wonderful. So be very careful in the language that you use, and make sure that you're being objective, not subjective. My last point there is that make sure you're not copying someone else's idea unless you can identify how it's different. No idea is original, but you still need a point of difference. The thing is that it's important to give the funders confidence that you're not going to waste taxpayers' money, and every detail highlights your abilities and capabilities. Unfortunately, the lack of detail could give an impression that you're not quite as capable. So take that into account, keep that in mind, and assume the panel has no knowledge of you, your business, or your project, because then you're much more likely to really think about what's relevant information for them to know. Coming up is my favourite slide. 10 most common mistakes. There's a long list of common mistakes like spelling and grammar, and you'd be surprised how many people make spelling and grammar mistakes and forget about spell check. So let's start with number one. Pretty obvious. If you haven't made the effort to contact the funder, you're already going to go to the bottom of the list, because there's no information about your project other than what they're reading. And the reality is that they really want to support you. So if you haven't communicated with your funder, if you haven't got in touch and had a chat, then that's unfortunate. Number two, funders are really specific about who's eligible and what's eligible, as well as what's not eligible. So reading all the documents is going to put you in good stead, but you'd be surprised how many people apply for things that they aren't eligible. So if you're in doubt, refer to point number one and have a chat with your funder. This third one is also really annoying, because the questions have been written for a reason, and although they do seem similar sometimes, they have a specific role. So don't think that you can just duplicate the answer that you provided in question number 3 for question number 4, because that's not the case at all. And definitely do not write "see above." So I think if you're confused or you aren't sure about the questions, you really need to go back and review the grant objectives and the criteria and reconsider what that question is asking. Number 4, if you're not including enough info, again, you're less likely to be approved. So put yourself in the funder's shoes and think about what you would want to know. Think about all the details you ask your staff, and remember that an application needs that level of detail as well. Use the spell check and grammar on a computer goes without saying. The occasional mistake is going to be overlooked. Don't worry about that. But applications that are poorly written could indicate a lack of ability to complete the project successfully, and you just don't want to give the funder that impression at all. So use that spell check. Retrospective costs This is really, it's very easy to tell if an applicant isn't experienced in grants if they are applying for retrospective costs. So another reminder, if you've already started your project, it's not eligible. You need to plan in advance, but you can't start it until the project funding is approved. Asking too much money or low value for money is a little bit tricky, I will admit. Some projects are just too expensive, or they don't benefit enough of the community or enough of the industry, or the outcomes aren't established, and so the value for money appears lower. Most funders aren't going to be able to tell you whether you're applying for the right amount. They might give you a hint, but technically speaking, they haven't read your application, so they don't really know the full details. So what you really need to do is make sure that your application supports your argument for why you should be awarded. The budget needs to include notes and be itemised with those individual project costs that we talked about before. The quotes provide even more detail, and when the quotes and the budget detail, when it all combines, it provides a more complete picture. So if you're light on with budget info, it could indicate a lack of financial ability to manage the project successfully, and that's not a great sign. So make sure you do spend some time to be really, really clear on what you need and what all the details are of that budget. Lastly, if you don't have support, if you don't have community support, if your customers don't want to buy, if your customers actually don't want to buy online and you're trying to sell online, then that means it's going to be really hard for you to get an online project through a grant. And that might sound really obvious, but you need to have that support from the community. We need to know that your customers actually want something. So it could be that it's really good for the industry, it could just be really good for your business, or you could be collaborating with someone. You could be building a logistics warehouse that's actually going to service quite a few different industries, or it's a community logistics warehouse. So there's more inclusivity in who can be part of those facilities. So if you don't have that support or those collaborations or partnerships, you're less likely to be funded. So again, you need to think beyond your business and look at how it impacts others and how it's really meeting those grant objectives. So this is a good segue into one of our last polls. We'd love to know if you've been unsuccessful for applying for a grant, and we can see that there's hasn't been so many grants applied for in this group, but if you have been intending to apply, what barriers did you face? And I will be the first to admit that these barriers are very real. There is no doubt that grant applications can be very difficult sometimes, and they take a lot of time, and sometimes the requirements aren't very clear. So everybody that's in grant making does work hard to try to peel away some of these barriers, but it's true that they still do exist. So please tell us what barriers you face. Yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks. That's all good to know. Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to a chart that's really fantastic in explaining the difference between an outcome and an output. Every funder now asks you to identify your project outcomes, and this is a question that stumps people a lot. So let me explain to you. Outcomes are the impacts of the project. They're the widespread effect or benefit to the community or the industry. Outcomes indicate a change in how we think and act. So it's a behaviour change or a process change or an enhancement. It's not how much you produce, but it's the effect of what you produce. Not to be confused with outputs, which is actually how much you produce. Outputs is the number of items produced, and that can contribute to an outcome. So this slide is from the Southwest Development Commission RED grant, which is Regional Economic Development. And I've got a couple of examples here to show you some different ways that you can see what an outcome is. Now, the jobs outcome is really, really important for all government, because they're hoping to provide opportunities that employ more people. So even though you can see that the target is a number, remember that the output contributes to the outcome. So the outcome is that those 3 full-time employed targets, full-time equivalent, I should say, targets, they contribute in productivity and in so many other ways. There's really significant economic development through jobs. So the target is a number, but it's about the outcome. So I have included this in the cheat sheet on Jargon, and when you refer back to this slide, it will become really clear. And so we're going to jump into jargon busting. So I've mentioned some of the jargoning grants, and as I said, you'll see this cheat sheet. Is there anything on this list that is not clear to anybody? A lot of these will be new words to you. So I'd really love to hear if anybody has a question about some of these. I'm going to jump in though and say that both acquittal and evaluation are in the next slides. But is there anything in there that anybody would like more information on, and we can have a chat just really quickly? No one? Look.
Actually, sorry, could I interrupt, please, Dominic?
Absolutely.
So, regarding funds, I was confused whether or not, if you have funds in one of the questions, you're not doubling up if it's your funds and then you're getting funds, say, from a loan. So how you actually conclude that, is that your own contribution, or the bank funds is leveraged fund?
Yes, it's leveraged funds, because you've had to apply for that. So it is another source of income. Yes. So
did you say that leveraged funds are good?
Yes, they
enhance an application. That's
right. They're very good.
Thank you.
Many funders require leveraged funds. So that, as I said before, that could be that you have another grant that you're also applying for that project, but a different part of the project. And that means that there's a little bit, it's a little bit more, your project is likely to be a little bit more sustainable. So leveraged funds is becoming much more of a requirement across all government funds. So when you're writing your application, I really, really encourage you to use the same language as the funding guidelines and in the form itself, because that gives the funder some confidence that you're on the same page, that you know exactly what's required. And of course, if you're not sure, absolutely ask your funder for examples. Oh, this is my least favourite slide, because no one likes doing acquittals, but it's part of the contract. So an acquittal is a report on the project, and you acquit your grant at the end of the funding term. The requirements are usually set out in your contract, and some funders have a template, but others just ask for a report. So this list here is all of the things that goes in an acquittal. So your stats, your facts and figures, they're basically your outputs and any other data. For evidence and outcomes, you might have photographs or designs. So for instance, if you're building that beautiful logistics warehouse, you would include photographs of the warehouse itself. Or if your grant is for marketing, you might include some of the ads that you actually were able to produce through that fund. Evaluation could include a feedback survey, could include that customer survey. You might include a customer survey before you went ahead and did the project, and then a survey once you finish the project, and that way you can measure the results. Your final budget will need to show how you spent the money. So that's including the invoices and the receipts. You need to keep everything and provide everything. But don't write a book. Please keep it simple. Make sure you can email your report. Don't create a beautiful custom printed artwork because it's absolutely not necessary. And as this acquittal is part of the project, if you don't do it, you might have some funds withheld. Some funders provide a milestone payment that's attached to the acquittal. So an example could be that you'll get the last 10% of your funds once you've submitted your acquittal, once you've, acquitted your grant. So if you don't submit it, you'll lose your 10%. And also it means that you won't be eligible for any future funding. So pull all of this together as you go so that when it does come time to acquit, you're absolutely ready. And if you've got any questions, ask your funder because they're really happy to help you with examples of what you should be putting in your acquittal. So I said I didn't like doing acquittals, but I really do like evaluation. Evaluation is a combination of different measurement methods and tools, and it paints the picture about the project. It tells you if you've achieved your objectives, which of course would be your SMART objectives, and that's simple, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Or if you've got another derivative of what SMART is, but so the evaluation really helps to identify the outcomes. It's a really positive process because it highlights what you did well and it has learnings on how to do things better. And let's be honest, not every project goes the way you hope, but if you evaluate it properly, it's a great resource. It should include things to consider next time or things not to do. Now, you don't need to include all of these methods that you're seeing on the screen right now, and it's likely that you already use some without realising they're part of an evaluation. I mean, you all most likely have some kind of monthly report, which is a form of evaluation. When you're preparing for a grant application, one of the most important tools is a survey to gain feedback and ensure the project is relevant for your community, your customers, your industry, and also to see how you've improved. So take into account that a survey is going to be very, very valuable to you. My tip for evaluation is to plan it from the beginning because you should be monitoring your project throughout the whole funding term, not just waiting until the end. Most applications now ask for how are you going to evaluate your project? So you really need to think about how you're going to measure it. Think about whether you completed your project on time, was it on budget, did you have enough resources, were the outputs on target, and what was the feedback? So there's some examples of things to include in your evaluation. And because we're talking about evaluation, we have one last poll, and that's our evaluation. We would really like to know how we went tonight. How did you think we did in presenting this webinar to you? Please let us know. We really appreciate your feedback. There's a lot of content in this webinar. So We're really excited to be able to give you the presentation so that you can refresh your memory, and of course some cheat sheets which have a lot more explanation in than the slides do. And the city, of course, is always there to help you. So if you have any questions about grants, please give them a call.